Hi, everyone. Doug Monda joins us today. He is the founder of Survive First. It's an organization dedicated to the mental well-being of first responders. He has a long-standing history in law enforcement. He retired from law enforcement as an undercover narcotics agent with the Cocoa Police Department, a city in Brevard County, Florida. He comes on today to talk about his career, why his mental health took a turn for the worse, and why he's dedicated to helping anyone in a first responder position and their families get the help they need in order to continue their jobs and survive their jobs. Thank you for joining us.
I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristin Sunanta Walker. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show, after several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second.
After all we promised, we'd be cordial.
All right, everybody. We are here with Doug Monda, who you just heard a little bit about, and Barry Toone with Stepstone Connect. Barry, thanks for co-hosting with me.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And Doug, thanks so much for coming on my show.
Oh, it's my honor. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we were just chatting about how you're a 3-word guy, and that's not, that's a typical kind of a guy thing, don't you think? Like, just get to the point in 3 words or less.
Yeah, or maybe it's an uneducated response. I'm just not very good at writing.
Well, you're good at talking, and that's why you have a show. So
yeah,
that's what counts. So tell our listeners just the name of your podcast.
So it is called Survived, and it is through the Survive First Foundation.
And, just so they have a little bit of background about what you did. Can we get into what made you become an advocate for first responders around their mental health?
Wow.
I know,
actually,
big question right out of the gate.
Yeah, no, that's not a question that's usually asked to me very often, but it's actually probably the most important question. Why do we do the things we do is really important. And it's funny, I just made a post on my LinkedIn page about that, because so many companies want to help first responders. And I always tell them, well, what's your reasoning for it?
Right.
Like, why do you want to help us? And that was what brought me to Survive First, was after going through my own suicide attempts and depression and things of that nature. As I went through the system, I realized how horrible the system was that was in place for me. And I had received some sort of help. And when I came back to work, I realized, what little bit of help I received, I learned enough that I could see it outside of myself. Like, I could really see post-traumatic stress and depression and anxiety, which seems to be the lead factors for first responders. I saw that in so many guys around me. And it stunk, for lack of better terms. And I just was like, man, this is not fair. And I was a team guy my entire life, from being a ball player to a spec ops guy to, being in a drug unit and SWAT and all that stuff. So I've always been, one of the boys, a team guy. I love my guys. I still to this day, I love my guys. And I just was like, man, somebody has to do something about this. This is just not a good thing.
And it was because you were, you were going through it yourself, but you also had colleagues and friends that were going through it too. And were you seeing them also trying to navigate a system that was not designed to actually help?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's still a very difficult system to navigate through. I mean, it's
Yeah.
hard to get agencies to buy into it from the top, which is really critical. But I I I I saw it. It's hard to see when you're young, or when you're young in the sport. I call it a sport sometimes, just being an athlete, but in the workforce, and it's hard to see it because you're so consumed in other stuff. But as you
Right.
get older in your career, it's much more visible. But I also would notice that, it's funny, TV portrays guys like me and my coworkers at a certain thing.
Right.
They always make all the spec op guys like, they eat bullets and they keep
Right. You're a
moving.
machine. Yeah.
Yeah,
You're not
you
actually
don't,
human.
yeah, you don't break, and you don't care, and you shoot people and get in your car and drive to the next scene, and it's so unrealistic. And
Yeah.
I tell people, like, whenever we were on our way to missions, guns in our hands, explode, like getting ready to jump out of the window or jump out the door, whatever it was, to get into a gunfight, like, our guys were not talking about, cutting themselves and talking about eating metal and being all
Right.
crazy. They were like, hey, I hope I get home by 5. My daughter's got a dance recital tonight. Like,
Right.
these are real people doing a real job. And obviously media and TV paints a picture to try to sell a movie, and it's really nothing like that.
Ever since I started doing these shows with first responders, and I'm on the side of, I had an ex-husband. I have an ex-husband who's had so many medical issues. I knew all of the first responders by their first name, and they came over for dinner often. So, but
Yeah.
once I started doing this and I started hearing the stories, and then I would watch a movie where, cop cars get blown up, or, people that are in a building that were there, helping their first responders. They're in a building, that building gets blown up in some fantastical, you know, big screen movie thing. I went, wait a minute. That is so horrible, because it's like these people are just disposable.
Yeah. Yeah. And we are. I mean, in the large scheme of things, we are disposable.
Yeah.
We're just in the eyes of most administration, you're just a tool, and you get paid to do a job. And unfortunately, that has a toll on first responders after a while.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because if that's what the attitude is, it's not good that it's in a movie and that's what the general public sees and gets desensitized to. But if that's not good on its own, but also to have it be where you work, it's like, okay, but I'm suffering, and it's because of this job, and I need help, and you've got a
Yeah.
closed door everywhere.
Talk for a second, Doug, about what the experience in Florida with the workers' comp, and we kind of watched that unfold
Mm,
in slow motion. And you have shared some things with me about your efforts to try to work through that system and all the obstacles that were placed in front of you, and just how disheartening that was.
Yeah.
Can you share something with the audience about that
Yeah.
experience?
So the work comp scenario from my injuries, is that what you're referring to? Because,
Yes.
well, yeah, because work comp wasn't in place, which is still a failed system with PTSD. But for me, I was, if the audience saw my bio, I obviously I was a triathlete competing on the world level, Ironman distance, former pro athlete. And so that was really a huge component of my life. That was really who I was. And it was great because it was the avenue that I could decompress from work, was to swim, bike, and run and do those things. And that's what I love to do. And then I got hurt at work, Not a big secret. It was all over national news. An 11-year-old kid plowed me into a tree. I received a severe concussion, which I think was number 11, like documented concussions, and I ruptured disc in my back. So obviously in the workforce, you got to go through work comp. Well, work comp in Florida is horrendous, to the point where they were like, he needs to go to physical therapy. He needs to do this. I didn't want to like take any drugs. I'm an anti-drug guy. I don't take pain meds. So there was physical therapy. And obviously the surgeons were telling me physical therapy is not going to fix what you have. Yeah, I had bone fragment, and I had spinal cord issues, and they're like, oh, he needs to do physical therapy. So it was about a year of fighting the system. I ultimately had to get with my work and sue work comp to get fixed. And work comp was like, he didn't hurt his back from that injury. He hurt his back from running 36 marathons and doing Ironman. And so then I'm at home and I'm basically immobilized. I can barely, if anybody's ever had a back problem, you'll get what I'm saying. Like I couldn't even get off the couch. I could barely take care of myself. And they literally had people on my street with video cameras filming me. Like I'd see them. Obviously, it's not easy to sneak up on me. I'd see them a mile away, videotape, because they thought I was probably trying to pull a move. And they really just, it was really disgusting because it hurt my feelings. I'm like, wow, I've given my entire life for my country and my community, and this is how I'm being treated. And I was like, listen, just fix me. I don't want to retire. I don't want to sue anybody. Just fix me, because I want to get back to work and I want my life back. That's really all I wanted. And they wouldn't do it. They fought me tooth and nail. And ultimately, the surgeon wanted to fit. And it was funny, work comp sent me to their surgeon, a specific surgeon, because they didn't like all the doctors I was going to. And their surgeon was the one who ultimately went to bat for me in court to say I needed to be fixed. And he ultimately said, listen, I'm going to fix you, and I'll just send them the bill, and I'll send the bill to your insurance, and whoever pays it, pays it. And that's how it ended up for me.
I did not know that was how that ended up. That's I recall you talking about just
it was
frustration.
It was a pretty horrible experience.
Yeah. Well, I knew there was a lot of frustration with a lot of your guys, as you call them, and you were trying to work with several of them to try to get them help. And it was a combination, I think you said, of just really needing help, but also just the emotional pain that went along with just not being helped after what you'd given to the community.
How did you pull yourself out of that in order to
and it was
created?
Well, I didn't pull myself out. I actually put a gun to my head and pulled the trigger after shortly after that. But what ultimately, going to treatment, my wife being the support rock that she is, and the love and support, and my SWAT team and guys rallying behind me, is what I needed. There in my industry, that I was like the guinea pig, as some of them will say. Not too many people were exposed to it. It wasn't talked about, and especially in my area, in my department, it had never happened, and so I didn't have until that horrible moment. I didn't have anybody helping me or supporting me. So that's kind of a big part what turned things around for me.
And your wife got involved in this organization with you.
Yeah, I don't really have a choice. She's listening. If you know Karen, she kind of, all my friends tease her because she says about 100 times a day, "No, Doug, you can't do that." And she's kind of the boss, which is good. Things are much better with her in charge.
We'll have her come on the next time you come on and hear from the boss too.
Yeah. Okay. That's good.
So when you started, talking about things like mental health out loud, with colleagues and so on, was there a reception from the people closest to you that you work with were they receptive to hearing it because it was you talking about it, or was it just across the board, everybody, there's an uncomfortable elephant in the room and it's the things Doug is saying?
When I came back, there was very little negativity. There was a few people that said things that were pretty hurtful. And I think not maliciously to hurt me, but when people don't know what to say, sometimes they say dumb stuff.
Right.
But for the most part, I'd like to think, and this is what I was told by a few people, that I had so much respect for what I've done in the industry, being a leader of a SWAT team, and just my background and my resume, that a lot of guys, when they saw me come back, that respect came, and they felt comfortable. They also saw the new me, the old me, the original Doug, before I turned into that monster. So they saw that in me, in my behavior. And it really wasn't maybe a day or two where I came back to work, where guys started coming up to me and going, "Hey, Doug, do you mind talking to me about what you went through? I need some advice." And that's really what opened the door for me to do what I'm doing, because so many people in such a short amount of time started coming to me going, "Hey, dude, I need some advice." I even had chiefs from other departments calling my chief and calling me going, "Hey, what did you guys do in this situation when Doug came back?" And, especially, I was a SWAT leader. Obviously, I make really radical decisions. So a lot of it too was, wow, you got a guy who is, so-called crazy, and he has automatic weapons, and he's got availability to explosives and things of that nature. How are you guys handling that? And my chief, to this day, I brag about him all the time. He was a chief 3 days when I tried to kill myself. And the second time, not the first time, the second time. And I had two bouts. And he went to bat and he said, "This is what we need to do for our guys. This is, they're on our team. This is our family. We have to take care of them."
I have a question for you. When you're, depression is something, in PTSD, especially including complex PTSD, these are things that, I'm sure you understand them in a way that you never did before. But, these are things that can come back. Trauma can rear its head at other times, especially when you're on the front line like you are with your work, or anyone that's a first responder. How do you talk to people about recognizing the signs within themselves to go, you know what, maybe I need to up my medication for a bit. I see myself going down a path that doesn't look good, because it's something. Usually when it's a mental health thing, you're in denial and you're afraid of that depression or whatever it is, or panic attack or whatever coming back. And so you tend to want to deny it. So how do you, talk about that with people? Because in your line of work, they can't really deny it.
No, it's funny you asked that, because I still struggle all the time. It's just something that I deal with on a daily basis, but I continually do aftercare as much as I can, not as much as I should, but as much as I can. And I'm currently, like, this time of year is really, really hard through, the holidays.
Same here. Same here.
Yeah, the holidays are particularly tough for me. I was saying it was, I had an adopted son for 3.5 years, and I lost him after 3.5 years. And one of the last things I did with him was this time of the year at Christmas. So this particular, I personally have not done holidays in probably 5 years.
Yeah.
It's a bad time of the year. So I really have to focus on the aftercare component and use the tools that have been provided for me to stay in that, if that answers part of the question.
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, you have to be, hyper vigilant about it. I have to too. I mean, this time of year, I have seasonal affective disorder. So this time of year, I know. But here's the sneaky thing, and I know listeners, I want you to hear this too. When you think about this, we tend to think, oh, those who are not first responders, yeah, we have seasonal affective disorder, we have to watch it, whatever. But think about if your job is to be a first responder and you also have this. They're not immune to these things either, and they even have a higher risk of having them. So I guess I want to make that clear that, when you're dealing with somebody that may be walking up to give you a ticket or coming up to your house because something's going on that's dangerous, remember that they're a person that could be struggling just like you do.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey listeners, a quick but important notice for all the shows that we'll be doing for our first responders. In 2018, the number of police officers, firefighters, EMTs, and veterans, anyone who's considered a first responder, who died of suicide was greater than the combined total killed in the line of duty. More attention is being paid, but help is often elusive. Even with more available resources, those who are first in line to help us actually asking for help for themselves, that can be the hardest thing for them to do. Mental Health News Radio Network is working with Stepstone Connect to give voice to our incredible first responders. Stepstone Connect is an organization born of the belief that accessibility and confidentiality will eliminate traditional barriers to treatment. Privacy and the peace of mind that comes with it, combined with easy, everywhere access, underlines Stepstone's mission and treatment philosophy. It's simple. With access to the internet and a device with a camera, you're a click away from leading mental health clinicians who specialize in the treatment of PTSD and other trauma-related injuries for first responders and their families. If you or someone you care about is struggling, please don't let another day pass before discovering what Stepstone can do. Stronger connections, everywhere access, stepstoneconnect.com. You can find out more by going to their website, stepstoneconnect.com, or call 800-495-3761. Now back to the show.
I mean, I try to tell people all the time, they're doing a job, and like you said, writing a ticket. I just spent a week with a North Carolina state trooper, and everybody, even me, I have a badge in my pocket, and I'm terrified of state troopers because we all know when we drive down the highway, they just scare the hell out of everybody. And this particular trooper, that bothers him. And I told him, I said, do you realize that every day you choose to get in your car and go to work, you save millions of lives?
That's
He goes, what do you mean? I go, because if you were sitting in the median scaring the hell out of everybody, people would drive like idiots because they drive 80, 90 miles an hour. In Florida, they do. On the highways. And I go, man, it's terrifying. You know how many people would die if you weren't there? I go, you save people's lives. You don't even realize it.
That's
and
right.
it was funny. He had never looked at it. But, he's doing a job. That's what he gets paid to do. I wasn't a ticket writer, so I don't get that part of it. But, they're doing a job. My very first year as a police officer, I was Christmas Eve and I was going home. I was on day shift. And right before I went home, there was a call where a little girl got ran over by a car. A senior citizen had a heart attack, died at the wheel, went off the road and plowed this young, I think she was like 11 or 12. And I'd already been, where I worked is a horrible high crime rate, number 6 in the nation per capita. So I was used to that already right out the gate. But Christmas Eve and a little girl riding her bike home. So it impacted me. And when I went home, I was in a foul mood. And my wife at the time, she was like, got mad at me for being upset. And when I told her what happened, her comment to me was, well, thanks for ruining my Christmas. And so that particular moment, she was young, we were young, she wasn't educated in the job. But at that particular moment, I did what every cop does. I shut down and I said, I will never tell her about my job ever again.
Right.
And that, so those are things, kind of part of your question, that
Absolutely.
These people are human beings on holidays working and how they get affected. And could you imagine like a firefighter? I mean, all they do is respond to people dying or sick or injured or, and cops. I tell people all the time, nobody calls us for cupcakes.
Right.
Nobody wants to put the cops on a calendar with our shirts off. I work real hard to look good without a shirt. Nobody's ever asked me to be on the calendar.
Right.
So,
right.
There's a light side to it at least.
Yeah. If you can't laugh about it, forget it. Barry, I wanted to throw something to you about because I know, with what you do at Stepstone, it's online counseling. And what I love, the beauty of this to me is, what I hear so much is we don't want to sit in a counseling room and maybe run into somebody that we work with that's also going to counseling. But if they do it, it just seems like a much more private or anonymous way to get help, is how I saw it, looking at it from the outside view. Is that something, I'm sure that's something you guys at Stepstone have thought about?
Yeah, it is. It is a big selling point. And, once first responders get into treatment, they can be more open to brick and mortar sometimes and be more open to mixed groups. But that first contact, that first reach out, that is a big deal. And there is an understandable resistance there. You don't want to go into treatment and see somebody that you've just busted. You don't want to be, and it's not even just that, you don't want to be seen by people who expect you to always be tough. They're expecting you to always be on your game, always be protecting everyone else. And there's that moment of vulnerability that is extremely hard. And when they can have that first connection, be in a private, confidential, almost anonymous cocoon, it's very different. And we find that the ability to open up and just get treatment and get help is significantly greater.
I agree with you, Barry, if I can elaborate on that. And it's funny you said that. That was the problem I had. So when I came back to work, my chief was like, "Hey, Doug, I want you to stay, I want to make sure that you stay in therapy, and you can go during the day, you can go on work, take your car, I don't care, just go whenever they make you the appointment." And me being a SWAT leader, every time I walked in the particular doctor that I went to, I really liked. But when I would go to, he had this huge, one of them offices where there's like 6 doctors in one office. So there was always like 50 people in the lobby. And unfortunately for me, I'm on the news a lot. And so I'd go in there and I'd go, and people would be looking at me. I wasn't in a fancy blue uniform. I wasn't that type of cop, but I would sometimes have to go in my SWAT gear. But I would go in there and I would go, "Oh my goodness, everybody's looking at me going, hey, isn't that the guy that was on the news? And what's he doing in here? And he's supposed to be, protecting the community, but he's in a psychiatrist or therapist, whatever their title is." And it was really unsettling for me. I didn't like to do it. And that was when I found out about Stepstones, I was like, man, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard of. And so when I talk to chiefs, every time I mention online therapy, they're like, they get this look on their face like, wow, really? I mean, we can do it from our phone or our Facebook, or what is it called? Not the Facebook, with the iPad and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's a pretty amazing tool. We even are big fans of it for tactical situations where you bring hostages out or a victim of a crime. You can go right into anywhere that has internet or mobile phone and provide a service that's really. And cops are funny. Cops don't like to be around people. I can't speak for firefighters, but I know cops, they don't like to be in crowds. They don't like to be in audiences and in lobbies, and they're very private. And that was kind of the healing grace for me.
It's interesting because when we first started this experiment, we assumed that because it's online, people would only really want to do it if they had the larger screen. So only if they would be at a desktop. And that, of course, just hasn't been the case, not just with young people, but especially, I think we've seen this with cops. We see more and more that it's right after their shift, they pull the car over and they pull out their smartphone or their tablet, and they'll do their session right there, because it's what's going on in their head is front and center. And they want that moment, that private moment, right when the shift's over, in their car. And it really does become, for some of them, they've described it as almost that spiritual experience of having that private moment. Nobody's there. And that's what I think is so appealing.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Doug, can you talk to us about, I want my listeners to know about your organization in terms of what it does, what the mission is for Survive First.
The ultimate mission, my wife will kill me because I can't recite our mission statement, but there's a mission statement that she can recite, but my mission and really the heart of Survive First and everybody involved is really to take the no out of getting help. And when I say taking the no out, cops unfortunately are not paid a very good salary. So it's real. That's the biggest thing when you ask them, why aren't you getting help? I can't afford the co-pays. I can't afford it. I can't afford it. I mean, isn't that the famous word of every American? I can't afford it. And also, even with the training and education aspect, departments don't really, mental health is not a mandatory training. So it's usually on the bottom of the budget or on the bottom of the mandatory training list. So what we've done is we don't want any first responder or their family to not get help because they can't afford it. So really what we do is we're that resource to help, pay for co-pays, or find them the resource in their community. If we have to send somebody to treatment, if they can't afford a plane ticket, we can help them in that capacity. Really, like I said, is to take the no out of getting the help that they need, they deserve.
I want to follow up on that. Doug, you've managed to do something that a lot of people haven't been able to do, and that is get the ears of a lot of the administrators, the chiefs, the people who are making decisions, and turn things around and convince them that this should be a priority. And that is something I will give you kudos for, because not very many people have been able to do what you do. But what is it that you're communicating to them that's flipping that switch and making them realize that, hey, we've got to do something different here?
Two things. Any chief, and I do quite a bit of work with chiefs and administrations. A lot of chiefs are not in that position. They're not a chief unless they've been in this industry a long time, and it's very rare that a chief doesn't have a friend or a colleague at some point, or a partner that has gone through this, or they, I haven't met a chief yet that doesn't know somebody that hasn't committed suicide in the industry. And so there's obviously that knowledge that they have. It's unfortunate that chiefs have been put in a position where, unfortunately in law enforcement, everything is CYA. If your listeners don't know what CIA stands for, just Google it or ask somebody on social media. And basically, to make sure that everything runs smoothly and legally, they get put in a bad spot. And the other thing with chiefs is a lot of people say crap rolls downhill. Well, actually it does, but it rolls back uphill. Being a chief is really hard responsibility. We help a lot of chiefs just in their own, so they're not singled out. What message I give to them after that, and after having that type of conversation with them, is basically, listen, man, this is business 101. We train our officers just like I was. We train them to shoot and the fight and the drive and to put tourniquets on and all the silly stuff every year, mandatory training. 20 years as a cop, how many times do I got to learn how to do CPR and put a tourniquet, and domestic violence training for 20 years? Like, if you don't get it the first year, you're in trouble, right?
Right.
So, but we don't focus on the mental health aspect. And what I tell these chiefs and administrators is like, listen, man, business 101. If you take care of your guys, they're going to be healthier and happier. And it kind of goes hand in hand. If you're happy, you're going to be healthier. If you're healthy, you're going to be happier. And I have an old spec op saying, one of my guys used to tell us every day before we went off into some sort of, mission or combat, he would always look at us and say, sharp mind, sharp sword. And basically what saying was, get your act together, get your mind right, because when you get out of this vessel, it's about to be going down. You know what I mean? And That's what I tell these chiefs. Listen, man, if your guys are healthier and happier, they're going to work better. They're going to perform better. They're not going to call out sick as much as they usually do. They're not going to be calling in with bull crap work comp cases, and your overtime is going to go down. And these are factors that we have to deal with in law enforcement. Your overtime is going to go down. More importantly, your guys are going to make better decisions. And when I say better decisions, look at social media. We got cops shooting people they shouldn't be shooting. We got cops whooping people's butts that shouldn't be getting whooped. And, little things like that. Yeah, it happens. I'm one of the boys, and I've done it myself, but I'm here to say, yeah, it happens. But you also got cops that are under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. And anybody who's ever been a parent knows that you're going to crack sooner or later when the stress gets too much. I mean, parents do it too. So What I tell them is get these guys healthier, because listen, not only is all that going to change, but your high liability issues are going to go down. Your bad call makes when they're making bad calls, and the lawsuits are going to go down. The complaints are going to go down when your guys are healthier and happier. And I saw it with my own eyes in my department when I came back to work. With a chief who is still on board to this day and supportive and endorses it. And when his guys have problems, like, hey, let's not worry about punishing you. Let's fix you. Let's get you help. Let's get you back on your feet and back on your A game. And it works. And the attitude changes of the officer, and the morale changes. And when the crew's happy, the other people around him are happy. And it's just a domino effect of positivity and a good way. And it's funny when I say this I've said this to large crowds of chiefs, I can see the looks on their face, the light bulb turning on, like, wow, I didn't even think of that. And so that's one of the things that we discuss. I'm actually, next week, I'm flying to a place in Florida to talk to a bunch of administrators about the topic we just got done talking about. Does that answer it? Does that answer it, Barry?
No, it's perfect. And, I hope you'll keep on doing that, because as the message starts to get out, you're right. There is that economic component, but there's just a basic job satisfaction. And I don't think that gets enough attention, that when you've got people coming to work that are actually happy,
right,
there are so many things that fall into place.
Or even if they're not happy, but they know that they're supported.
Or even take it another step, just that they can stand to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's so many different levels, and everybody can kind of work from where they are. But that level of support, hearing the chiefs, what you said about the chiefs reaching out and the men responding to that the way they did.
And women.
And women.
Oh, and
you can always correct me on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, listen, one of the greatest supervisors I ever had in my career was a woman. And she, to this day, is still supportive of everything I do. And it was important. So it don't matter, whether, it's a man or a woman or a chief or a sergeant. Right. You got to have the buy-in from the top. It's critical. But I didn't tell you this earlier, but when I had my first bout, so I came back to work literally after putting a gun to my head and pulling the trigger. I came back to work the next week, and my chief at the time called me into his office and said, I don't know what's wrong with you, but whatever's wrong with you, you need to lock it in a closet and get your ass back to work. That's what he said to me. And that obviously didn't work, because a couple months later, I was right back in the same spot. But luckily for me, he left shortly after him telling me that, and a new chief came in, who is the current chief, who's the one I was just talking about, who said, no, we need to fix this guy. He's one of ours. He actually used the term, we created this monster, we need to fix it. So it is critical that the chiefs buy into it. And he was a chief 3 days when I had my second bout. And not only did he support it, he drove me and my partner. I talk about this on my show. He drove me to the facility where I went to get help, and he picked me up. Drove me to Tennessee, Florida, like 13-hour drive to a place to figure out what was wrong with me. And he came and picked me up, brought me back to work.
Mm. Yeah, that's the kind of support that's needed.
Who does that?
Yeah. Well, Doug, tell my listeners just one more time the name of your show, and then also where they can find out more about you.
So the name of the show is called Survived, and you can find it on the Survive First Facebook page or on the web page, which is www, right? It's three of them, sorry, .survivefirst.us. My wife's going to kill me.
I think we need to leave this in totally.
Do not edit that part.
She's going to be like, oh my God, because listen, I have to listen to myself talk every week. The last thing I want to do is go on my own webpage and look at myself.
Oh yeah. I'm so sick of my picture.
www.survivefirst.us. So they can see it on there. Go on Facebook and find us. And if you go on the Facebook podcast, the link through that, it's live, so you can see it, and it's interactive. So a lot of the listeners send comments in, and I answer them as best as I can.
Nice.
We have guys that talk to each other on the show and answer questions. Pretty cool. Really cool.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on my show and helping Mental Health News Radio Network support first responders with our First Responder Podcast Network. This is awesome. So thanks for agreeing to help us champion this with Stepstone, and Barry, thank you too for championing this.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to work with you, and Doug, you light up when you get behind the camera. I'm always afraid that you're never going to say a word because you're so quiet normally. But man, you turn on that mic and you just light up. I love you, brother, and give my best to Karen.
I love you too. Thank you, man. Yeah, no, thank you guys. It's been an honor, and thanks for having me on there. And I'm always willing to do it. If I can just have 5 minutes every cop's time, man, I just don't want them to have to go what I went through. Yeah. So thanks for the opportunity. And
Absolutely. And listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the First Responder Mental Health Network on Mental Health News Radio.
Aggressive, but never without good intentions. I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps, or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all, we promised we'd be cordial. Sometimes in you I can fight it.
Good boy.